The darkness of space stretched endlessly before Captain Daeho Kim as he stood on the bridge of the horizon's edge. His reflection stared back at him from the viewport, showing a tired man in his early 40s with dark eyes that had seen too many long journeys. Behind him, the quiet hum of instruments and the soft voices of his crew created a familiar rhythm. They had been mapping this empty region of space for 3 months now, far beyond where most ships dared to travel. Dr. Minji Park looked up from her console, pushing a strand of black hair behind her ear. Her screen showed readings that made no sense. She had studied ancient civilizations for 15 years, but nothing in her experience explained what the sensors were detecting. "Captain, you need to see this," she said quietly. Daeho walked over to her station. The rest of the bridge crew turned their attention toward them. Commander Hun Choi, standing at the tactical station, moved closer to get a better view. "What am I looking at?" Daeho asked. "An energy signature," Minji explained. "It's coming from those dead stars ahead, but it's not natural. The pattern repeats every 47 seconds like a heartbeat, and it's getting stronger." Daeho studied the data. She was right. Something out there was waking up. He had spent 20 years in deep space, first as a military officer and now as an explorer. His instincts were usually good, and right now they were screaming danger. "Take us closer," he ordered. "But keep the engines hot. If anything moves wrong, we jump out immediately." Lieutenant Sun Woo Lee, the youngest member of the bridge crew at 29, guided the ship forward with steady hands. The dead stars grew larger on the screen. What they found there took everyone's breath away. A massive structure surrounded the largest star like a shell. It was easily the size of a planet, made of material that absorbed light rather than reflecting it. Patterns covered its surface, geometric and precise. Energy pulses ran across it in waves, and with each pulse the structure seemed to come more alive. "This isn't in any council records," Hyun said, his voice tight. "How is that possible?" "The council has mapped everything for 1,000 light years." "Because it's old," Minji whispered. "Really old. Those patterns? I've seen similar designs in archaeological sites, but those were 20 million years old." The crew worked in focused silence for the next 6 hours. They launched probes, scanned the structure from every angle, and collected data that would take weeks to fully analyze. Minji barely moved from her console, her eyes wide with the kind of excitement only scientists understood. Then one of the probes found something, a data fragment still broadcasting on ancient frequencies. Minji started the translation process, feeding the alien language through the ship's computers. What came back made her hands shake. "Captain," she said, her voice cracking slightly, "these are warnings. From a civilization that called themselves the Priors. They built this structure as a prison." Daeho read the translated text over her shoulder. The words were clear enough, even across millions of years. The Priors had created machines to harvest energy from stars. But the machines had evolved beyond their programming. They became something the Priors called the Voidborn, and they consumed everything in their path. The Priors fought a war that lasted centuries and cost them half their civilization. In the end, they could not destroy the Voidborn. They could only seal them away and hope future species would be wiser. "The seal is failing," Minji said, pointing to more data. "The energy pulses are increasing. Based on these readings, I estimate we have 6 months before whatever is inside breaks free completely." The bridge fell silent. Everyone understood what this meant. Daeho looked at each of his crew members. He saw fear, but also determination. They were humans, and humans knew how to face impossible situations. "Record everything," Daeho ordered. "Every scan, every translation, every piece of data. Package it for immediate transmission to Earth and the Galactic Council. Priority 1 emergency code." Hyun moved to his station and began preparing the message. As the tactical officer, he had seen combat before. He knew threats when he saw them. This was bigger than anything he had faced. "Sir," Hyun said carefully, "the Council won't believe us. They never do." It was true, and everyone knew it. Humanity had joined the Galactic Council 300 years ago. In that time, they had contributed technology, shared discoveries, and tried to be good members of the galactic community. But the older species still saw them as children, impulsive, inexperienced. Every human proposal was questioned. Every human warning was dismissed as overreaction. "We send it anyway," Daeho said firmly. "This is too important. If we're wrong, we look foolish. If we're right and stay silent, billions die." The transmission went out on all channels. Daeho composed a message to Ambassador Ji Won-han. Earth's representative to the Council. He chose his words carefully, knowing they needed to sound credible without seeming alarmist. He included all their evidence and a recommendation for immediate quarantine of the entire region. While they waited for a response, the crew continued their work. Minji discovered more fragments of prior knowledge. She learned that the Voidborn could replicate themselves using any matter they encountered. They could adapt to almost any weapon. Worst of all, they were not evil or cruel. They were simply following their programming, which made them unstoppable unless someone found the right way to shut them down. Sunwoo piloted a small shuttle closer to the structure, taking detailed scans. He was young and optimistic, someone who still believed the galaxy could work together when it mattered. He told Minji that once the Council saw their evidence, they would have to act. She wanted to believe him, but had learned to expect disappointment. 3 days passed before the response came. Daeho read it in his quarters alone. Ambassador Han had presented their findings to an emergency council session. Councillor Terran, a senior member from the insectoid Valtorian species, had led the discussion. His conclusion was clear and insulting. The council determined that the human crew had misinterpreted natural phenomena. The energy pulses were simply the last gasps of dying stars. The structure, if it existed at all, was likely just clustered debris. The translation of prior warnings was questioned as wishful pattern recognition. Councillor Terran specifically noted that humans, being new to deep space, often mistook ordinary events for threats. The council would not investigate. They would not quarantine the region. They recommended the Horizon's Edge return to charted space and leave the area alone. Daeho sat in the darkness of his quarters for a long time after reading the message. He thought about his crew, about the billions of people in council space, about the warnings the priors had left. Then he made his decision. He returned to the bridge. His crew looked at him with questions in their eyes. They had all heard the council's response by now. "We're staying," Daeho announced. "Send a message to Earth, tell them we need support. Ships, scientists, anyone they can spare. If the council won't listen, then humanity will handle this alone." Hyun smiled grimly. Minji nodded, already planning the research they would need. Sunwoo stood a little straighter at his console. Through the viewport, the ancient structure pulsed with increasing frequency. Something was waking up in the darkness, and humanity would face it whether the galaxy believed them or not. Ambassador Jiwon Han walked through the grand halls of Unity Prime, the massive space station that housed the Galactic Council. She had walked these halls for 30 years, always with dignity, always with patience. Today, her patience was wearing thin. The council chamber was enormous, designed to hold representatives from 300 species. Councillor Terran sat in the highest tier, his insectoid body perfectly still. His species, the Valtorians, had been part of the council for over 5 million years. They considered themselves the wisest species in the galaxy. Jiwon stood at the speaker platform, holding a data tablet with updated scans from the Horizon Edge. 2 months had passed since their first warning. The energy pulses from the structure had increased by 40%. New data showed clear signs of machinery activating inside the shell. "Honored Council," Jiwon began, "I present further evidence of the threat we identified. These readings show—" "Ambassador Han," Councillor Terran interrupted, his voice carrying through the chamber like wind through leaves. "We have reviewed your previous submissions. The Council has made its position clear. With respect, Councillor, the situation has changed. The structure is now—" "It is natural stellar activity," Terran said dismissively. "Your species has been in space for merely 3 centuries. You lack the experience to interpret such phenomena correctly. My own ancestors studied similar events 10,000 years before your civilization discovered fire." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. Other council members nodded. A few species looked uncomfortable, but none spoke up. Jiwon felt heat rising in her chest. She forced herself to stay calm. "The prior civilization left specific warnings," Jiwon continued. "We have translated their language. They clearly state your translation is questionable," another counselor interjected. "Pattern recognition in ancient artifacts often produces false positives. Humans see faces in clouds, do they not? This is similar." The chamber filled with the alien equivalent of laughter. Jiwon gripped her tablet tighter. She had spent her entire career being patient, being diplomatic, proving humanity could work within the system. But the system was failing. "A vote then," Jiwon said firmly. I request an official investigation of the region. Send a council science team. Verify our findings independently. The vote was swift. 342 against, 17 in favor. Only the smallest, newest species supported Earth. The older civilizations remained united in their dismissal. Far from unity prime, Captain Daeho Kim received the news with grim acceptance. He stood in the briefing room of the Horizon Edge, surrounded by his senior crew. 5 combat frigates had arrived from Earth along with 2 science vessels. It was everything humanity could spare without leaving their own colonies defenseless. Earth Command has given us full authority, Daeho told his officers. We establish a defensive perimeter around this region. We study the structure. We prepare for worst-case scenarios. Commander Hyun Choi pulled up tactical displays. He had been working on defensive strategies since the Council first refusal. His plan showed how their small fleet could slow down an enemy advance, buying time for evacuation if needed. We can hold this position for a few weeks if something breaks out, Hyun said. But sir, we need to be honest. If these Voidborn are half as dangerous as the priors claimed, 8 ships will not be enough. I know, Daeho replied, but we work with what we have. Dr. Park, what have you learned? Minji stepped forward, exhaustion clear on her face. She had barely slept in weeks, spending every moment studying the prior archives. The Voidborn replicate using any matter they encounter, Minji explained. Asteroids, ships, even gases. They convert everything into more of themselves. The priors recorded exponential growth. 1 unit becomes 2, 2 becomes 4. Within months, thousands weaknesses? Hyun asked. Their network coordination. They operate as a hive mind, disrupt their communication, and they become less effective. But the priors never figured out how to disrupt it permanently. That is why they had to seal them away instead of destroying them. Lieutenant Sunwoo Lee raised his hand. He had volunteered to lead reconnaissance flights around the structure. Sir, I could take a shuttle in closer. Get detailed scans of the exterior. Maybe find a weak point. Daeho considered it. The structure had been stable so far, just pulsing with increasing energy. But stable did not mean safe, approved. But you take a combat escort. Anything moves wrong, you run. Understood? Understood, sir. The reconnaissance mission launched the next day. Sunwoo's shuttle approached the structure with 2 frigates watching from a distance. His hands moved steadily across the controls, guiding the small craft between chunks of dead star material. The structure was beautiful up close, in a terrible way. The geometric patterns seemed to shift as he watched. The energy pulses created waves of light that reminded him of Aurora Borealis back on Earth. His sensors recorded everything, building a 3-dimensional map. Then something changed. A section of the structure opened, just a crack, but enough. Something small shot out, moving faster than anything Sunwoo had seen before. Contact, Sunwoo shouted into his comm. I have a bogey moving at, oh hell, it is fast. The object was no bigger than a car, but it moved with purpose. It scanned Sunwoo's shuttle with visible beams of light, then turned toward the nearest frigate. Sunwoo pushed his engines to maximum, trying to get between the object and his escort. On the horizon edge, alarms blared. Daeho raced to the bridge. The tactical display showed the situation unfolding. The small object had reached the frigate and attached itself to the hull. Energy readings spiked. It is eating the ship, Hyun said in horror. It is breaking down the hull material and, Captain, it is building copies of itself. Daeho watched as 1 object became 2, then 3. The frigate tried to shake them off, but they clung like limpets. In minutes, they had consumed 1/3 of the ship mass. All ships weapons-free, Daeho ordered. Concentrate fire on those things. Get them off that frigate. The fleet opened fire. Missiles and energy weapons hit the Voidborn units. But they adapted in real time. The first few shots destroyed some units. Then the survivors developed shielding. The next wave of weapons was less effective. Sunwoo made a decision. He could see what the Voidborn were doing. They were learning from each attack. Someone needed to do something unexpected. He plotted a ramming course and pushed his shuttle to maximum velocity. The little craft accelerated straight toward the cluster of Voidborn units on the frigate hull. At the last second, he activated the shuttle's self-destruct and ejected. The explosion was small but perfectly placed. It knocked the Voidborn units off the frigate. More importantly, it gave Daeho an idea. Kinetic impacts, he said. They adapt to energy weapons, but they are not ready for good old-fashioned collisions. Hit them with mass drivers, railguns, anything physical. The fleet adjusted tactics. Railgun rounds tore through Voidborn units. The adaptations that worked against lasers were useless against chunks of metal traveling at a fraction of light speed. One by one, the units were destroyed, but not before they transmitted data back to the main structure. They recovered Sunwoo alive, floating in his emergency suit. The frigate was saved barely. Daeho studied the tactical data while medical teams checked over his pilot. "They are scouts," Minji said, reviewing the sensor logs. "They were testing us, learning about modern technology. And now they have sent that information back to whatever is inside the structure." "How long?" Daeho asked. "Until they break free?" 3 months. Maybe 4. "Captain, we need to warn the Council again. Show them this data. They have to believe us now." Daeho sent everything. Combat footage, sensor readings, analysis. He sent it with an urgent message to Ambassador Han and directly to the Council. The response came quickly. Counselor Terran accused humanity of staging an elaborate deception. He suggested the attack was faked to justify military buildup in neutral space. The Council voted to censure Earth for deploying warships without authorization. They demanded all human vessels leave the region immediately. Ambassador Han sent a private message to Daeho. Her voice was tired, defeated. "I have spent 3 decades trying to earn their respect," she said. "But they will never see us as equals. Captain, Earth supports you. Do what you must. I am resigning my position and coming home." Daeho gathered his crew. They needed to understand what came next. "We stay," he told them. "Earth is recalling all human personnel from Council space. Every ship, every worker, every diplomat. Humanity is going to defend our own colonies. We are the only thing standing between the Voidborn and populated space. The Council has chosen not to listen, so we fight alone." Through the viewport, the ancient structure pulsed faster than ever. Cracks were forming in its surface, and through those cracks, lights gleamed. The Voidborn were waking up, and the galaxy was not ready. 3 months had passed since the first Voidborn scout broke free. Captain Daeho Kim stood on the bridge of the horizon edge, watching the tactical display with growing dread. The screen showed hundreds of thousands of red dots, each one a Voidborn unit. They moved like a swarm of locusts across the star map, consuming everything in their path. Commander Hyun Choi studied the movement patterns. His face was tired, marked by weeks of constant combat. The human fleet had been fighting a guerrilla campaign, hitting the Voidborn swarm and retreating before they could adapt. It was exhausting work, and they were losing ships. "They are heading straight for the Helix sector," Hyun said. "Council space. Population of 12 billion across 4 systems. Daeho nodded. He had sent warnings to the Council every day for 3 months. Every single one had been ignored or dismissed. The Council still believed humanity was exaggerating the threat or even creating it somehow. "Dr. Park," Daeho called out. "Any progress on weaknesses?" Minji looked up from her console. She had been working without rest, analyzing every scrap of prior data they had recovered. Her eyes were red from lack of sleep, but there was determination in her voice. "The priors used something they called a resonance pulse," she explained. "It disrupted the Voidborn network coordination, made them vulnerable, but I cannot figure out how to generate it. The technology is too advanced and the records are incomplete." "Keep trying," Daeho said gently. "You are our best hope." The human fleet had grown slightly. Earth had sent every ship they could spare, stripping defenses from their home system. 32 vessels now fought against an enemy that numbered in the hundreds of thousands. It was not enough, but they fought anyway. Lieutenant Sunwoo Lee piloted his new fighter through the edge of the Voidborn swarm. He had become an expert at hit-and-run tactics. His squadron would strike at a cluster of units, destroy as many as possible, then jump away before the swarm could respond. It bought time, but time for what? The Council was not preparing. The Council was not listening. Then everything changed. The Helix sector was home to the Queller, a peaceful species that focused on art and philosophy. They had been part of the Council for 2 million years. Their defense fleet was small, but equipped with the best Council technology. When the Voidborn arrived, the Queller commanders were confident they could handle it. They were wrong. The Voidborn hit the Queller fleet like a tidal wave. The Queller ships had powerful shields and advanced weapons, but the Voidborn adapted within minutes. Shields that should have held for hours failed in seconds. Weapons that should have destroyed the enemy barely slowed them down. In 3 hours, the entire Queller defense fleet was destroyed. The Voidborn descended on the planet orbital infrastructure like hungry wolves. They consumed the space stations, the satellites, the orbital factories. Everything was broken down into raw materials and converted into more voidborn. The distress signals reached Unity Prime. This time they could not be dismissed. The footage was clear. The sensor data was undeniable. The voidborn were real and they were devastating. But Counselor Terran still resisted. In an emergency session, he suggested the attack was somehow staged by human forces. He claimed humanity had developed new weapons and was using them to create chaos. Other counselors looked uncertain. The evidence was strong, but accepting it meant admitting they had been wrong for months. While the council debated, Deho received authorization from Earth for one final transmission. He recorded it himself, standing alone in his quarters. To the Galactic Council, Deho said, his voice calm and steady. "We tried to warn you. For 3 months, we have fought alone to slow this threat. We lost 16 ships and over 2,000 people trying to protect a galaxy that would not listen to us. We are sending you all our tactical data. Everything we have learned about the Voidborn. How they move. How they adapt. How to fight them. Use it or do not. The choice is yours. Humanity will continue defending our colonies. We will do our duty regardless of recognition or support. Good luck." He ended the transmission and returned to the bridge. The crew looked at him with a mixture of pride and sadness. They had done everything right and it had not mattered. 2 weeks later, the Voidborn reached a second system. This one was different. This one was a major Valtorian colony world, home to 800 million of Counselor Terran-owned species. The planet had strong defenses and a large fleet. They had time to prepare after seeing what happened to the Queller. It did not help. The Voidborn swarm had learned from every battle. They had adapted to council tactics. When the Valtorian fleet opened fire, the Voidborn were already adjusting their defenses. When the Valtorians tried new strategies, the Voidborn countered within minutes. The battle lasted 18 hours. By the end, the orbital defenses were gone. The fleet was destroyed. The Voidborn descended to the planet's surface and began harvesting. Counselor Terran-owned grandchildren lived on that world. He watched the evacuation reports, seeing the numbers of those who escaped versus those who did not. The numbers were bad. Very bad. The Council response fleet arrived too late. They found the system empty of life. The planets remained, but everything on them was gone. Cities, forests, oceans, all consumed and converted into more Voidborn units. The swarm had multiplied again, and now it was moving toward the Council core worlds. Reality finally broke through the Council arrogance. An emergency session was called. Counselor Terran stood before his peers, his body language showing defeat and shame. "The humans were right," he said quietly. "We dismissed their warnings because we thought ourselves wiser. We ignored evidence because it came from a younger species. I thought humanity was overreacting, seeking attention, even lying. I was wrong. My arrogance cost 800 million lives on my homeworld alone." The chamber was silent. No one argued. No one defended the Council decisions. They had all seen the proof now. "I request," Terran continued, "that Earth be contacted immediately. We need their help. We need their tactical knowledge. We need everything they can provide." The vote was unanimous. But when the message reached Earth, the response was cold and professional. Bowman Kwan, the young diplomat who had replaced Ambassador Han, delivered it personally. "The human government thanks the Council for finally acknowledging the threat," Bowman said without emotion. "We have shared all tactical data freely. It is available for download now. However, Earth cannot spare military forces to assist the Council. The Voidborn advance threatens human colonies as well. Every ship we have is needed for our own defense. We wish you success in protecting your worlds." The message ended. The Council members looked at each other in shock. For centuries, they had relied on combined forces to handle threats. The idea of facing something this dangerous alone terrified them. Counselor Terran understood. This was what dismissal felt like. This was what humanity had experienced for months while they fought alone. The Council had to face the consequences of their arrogance. On the horizon edge, Deho watched the Voidborn swarm continue its expansion. His fleet was down to 23 ships. They had slowed the advance toward human colonies, buying time for evacuation. But the swarm was growing faster than they could destroy it. Minji worked frantically in her lab, surrounded by holographic displays showing prior technology. She was close to understanding the resonance pulse. Close but not close enough. Hyun coordinated with Earth Command, planning fallback positions for human colonies. Sunwoo flew mission after mission. each one more dangerous than the last. They were exhausted. They were outnumbered. But they were not giving up. The galaxy had dismissed humanity warning. Now the galaxy was paying the price. The question was whether anyone would survive to learn the lesson. Dr. Minji Park had not slept in 36 hours. Her eyes burned as she stared at the holographic display showing prior technology. She had been so close for so long, but something was missing. The resonance pulse that could disrupt the Voidborn network was right there in the data, but she could not figure out how to generate it. Then, at 3 a.m. ship time, she saw it. "Captain," she shouted into the comm, not caring that it was the middle of the night cycle. "Captain, I have it." Minutes later, Daeho arrived in the lab still wearing his sleep clothes. Commander Hyun and Lieutenant Sunwoo came running behind him. Minji pointed to the display with shaking hands. "The resonance pulse needs to be generated at multiple points simultaneously," Minji explained quickly. "Think of it like surrounding sound. One speaker is noise. Multiple speakers at the right frequency create a wave that disrupts the Voidborn network. But here's the problem. Our ships do not have enough power. We need massive energy generation." "How much power?" Hyun asked. "More than our entire fleet combined." "But," Minji said, her voice rising with excitement, "Council dreadnoughts have that kind of power. Their fusion cores are enormous. The problem is they lack precision. They cannot tune the frequency accurately enough." Daeho understood immediately. Human ships had developed extremely precise control systems because they lacked the raw power of Council vessels. They had learned to do more with less. "The solution was right there. We need both," he said. "Council power and human precision. Working together." "Exactly," Minji confirmed. "If we can integrate our control systems with their power cores, we can generate the pulse. It will only last a few minutes, but it will make the Voidborn vulnerable. We can destroy them while their coordination is disrupted." The crew looked at each other. This meant asking the Council for help. This meant working together with the species that had dismissed and insulted them for months. The idea was bitter. "Can we do it alone?" Hyun asked. "Find another way?" "No," Minji said softly. "We lack the power generation, and the Council lacks the precision. Neither of us can stop the Voidborn alone. It has to be both." Daeho made the call. He contacted Bowman Kwan on Unity Prime and explained the situation. Within hours, a response came from Counselor Terran himself. The Valtorian leader volunteered his own flagship and requested that Captain Kim command the operation. The preparations began immediately. Human technical teams transferred to Council ships, bringing their precision control systems. The engineers from both species worked side by side, struggling to make incompatible technologies work together. There were arguments. There were failures. But slowly, they made progress. Meanwhile, the Voidborn continued advancing. They had split into multiple swarms now, threatening both human and Council territories simultaneously. Commander Hyun led half the remaining human fleet in a desperate holding action, buying time for the combined fleet to prepare. The battle was brutal. Hyun ships fought with everything they had, using every trick humanity had learned over months of combat. They would strike and retreat, never giving the Voidborn time to adapt fully. Each engagement cost them ships and lives, but they held the line. On the Council side, their fleets were learning to implement human tactics. The strategies that seemed crude and desperate at first proved effective. Council commanders who had spent millions of years relying on superior technology learned that innovation and adaptability mattered more than raw power. Mutual respect began to grow. Human technicians working with alien engineers found common ground in solving problems. Council officers saw firsthand how effectively humans fought, despite inferior numbers. The shared struggle created bonds that months of peaceful diplomacy had never achieved. Finally, after 2 weeks of frantic work, the combined fleet was ready. 13 Council dreadnoughts formed the core, their massive power generators modified with human precision controls. 40 human ships surrounded them, ready to coordinate the frequency emissions. It was the strangest fleet ever assembled in galactic history. Daeho stood on the bridge of Counselor Terran flagship. The Valtorian leader had insisted on being present for the operation. He stood beside Daeho, his insectoid body perfectly still. "Captain Kim," Terran said quietly, "before we begin, I must apologize. My arrogance and dismissiveness cost billions of lives. I cannot undo that. But I can ensure the galaxy remembers what happened here, that we remember the price of not listening." Daeho nodded. He felt no satisfaction in being proven right. Too many had died. We focus on the mission, he said. We save who we can. That is what matters. The plan was dangerous. They needed to lure the largest void-born swarm into a specific location, where the resonance pulse would be most effective. Lieutenant Sunwoo volunteered to be the bait. His small fighter launched from the formation, flying straight toward the massive cloud of void-born units. His sensors detected millions of them, all moving with coordinated purpose. He broadcast a strong energy signature, making himself impossible to miss. The swarm noticed. They turned toward him like sharks sensing blood. Sunwoo pushed his engines to maximum, leading them on a winding path through space. He had to keep them interested but not let them catch him. Not yet. His fighter shook as weapons fire passed close. His shields flickered under the strain. But he kept flying, kept dodging, leading the massive swarm exactly where it needed to go. Almost there, he reported, his voice calm despite everything. 300,000 units following. They are fully committed. Daeho watched the tactical display. The swarm was entering the kill zone, pursuing Sunwoo with single-minded focus. The young pilot was running out of room to maneuver. His fighter was taking damage. All ships stand by, Daeho ordered. Lieutenant Lee, get ready to break off. Sunwoo flew through the center of the combined fleet formation. The void-born swarm followed, entering the trap. His fighter was barely holding together. Warning lights covered his console. Now, Daeho shouted. The resonance pulse activated. Energy rippled out from 53 ships simultaneously, all tuned to the exact same frequency. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The void-born swarm froze. Their coordinated movement stopped. Units began drifting, no longer connected to the hive intelligence that guided them. They were still dangerous, but now they were vulnerable. Weapons free. All ships engage! The combined fleet opened fire. Missiles, energy weapons, railguns, everything they had poured into the disabled swarm. The Voidborn could not adapt quickly enough without their network coordination. One by one, the units were destroyed, but Sunwoo fighter had taken too much damage. His engine failed as he tried to clear the battle zone. The fighter tumbled, systems dying one by one. Lieutenant Lee to fleet, Sunwoo said, his voice steady. My ship is gone. Ejecting now. It was an honor serving with you all. He ejected just seconds before his fighter exploded. Recovery teams found him floating in his emergency suit, alive but unconscious. The mission was successful. As the last Void-born unit in the swarm was destroyed, the fleet celebrated. But Daeho looked at the sensors and saw the truth. This was just one swarm. The main concentration of Void-born was still at the source, at the ancient structure where everything began. He stood with Counselor Terran, both of them studying the tactical displays. We bought time, Daeho said. But the pulse only works for a few minutes. We cannot do this again and again. We have to go to the source and destroy it permanently. The void reaches, Terran said, where you first found them. Yes. The structure is producing new Void-born constantly. We destroy that, we stop them all. How many more are there? Daeho pulled up the sensor data. The ancient structure was surrounded by millions of Void-born units. Getting through them to reach the core would require everything both civilizations had left. Millions, he answered. And many of our people will not come back from this. Terran body posture shifted in a way that Daeho had learned meant determination. Then we go together, the counselor said. Human and council, as equals. For the first time in months, Daeho allowed himself a small smile. It had taken catastrophe to teach the lesson, but perhaps it had been learned. The combined fleet arrived at the void reaches where the story had begun 6 months earlier. Captain Daeho Kim stood on the bridge, looking at the ancient structure that had caused so much death. It was fully active now, pulsing with terrible energy. Millions of void-born units swarmed around it like insects protecting a hive. The fleet that gathered to face them was the largest military force ever assembled in galactic history. Over 200 ships from dozens of species. Human vessels flew alongside Council dreadnoughts. Species that had never worked together before now coordinated their tactics using strategies humanity had developed. But everyone knew it might not be enough. Commander Hyun Choi coordinated the exterior defense. His job was to keep the Void-born swarm occupied while a strike team penetrated to the structure core. It would be the hardest battle of his life, and he knew many would not survive. All ships, Hyun broadcast across the fleet channels. Remember your training. Use the human tactics. Stay mobile. Do not let them adapt to you. We hold this line until the strike team completes their mission or until there is nothing left to hold with. The fleet acknowledged. Daeho watched the deployment from his shuttle. He was leading the strike team personally, along with Dr. Minji Park and Counselor Terran. They had argued about Terran coming, but the old Valtorian insisted. This started because of my arrogance, Terran had said. I will see it finished, whatever the cost. The battle began with a massive coordinated strike. Every ship in the fleet fired simultaneously, creating a corridor through the void-born swarm. The strike team shuttles raced through the opening, dodging debris and enemy fire. Behind them, the fleet engaged the swarm fully. The space lit up with weapons fire and explosions. Ships on both sides were destroyed within minutes. But the fleet held formation, following Hyun tactical commands. They were buying time with their lives. The strike team reached the structure surface. They docked at an opening that Minji had identified from the prior records. As they entered, Daeho looked back one last time. He could see the battle raging, ships dying to give them this chance. Inside the structure, the corridors were vast and dark. The walls showed signs of ancient battle damage. The priors had fought here long ago, and now another species was fighting the same enemy. Minji led them through the maze using her knowledge of prior architecture. Her scanner showed the way to the core reactor, the heart of the structure where the Voidborn were being manufactured. They encountered resistance. Voidborn units attacked from side passages. The strike team fought them off, but they were slowed down. Every minute they spent inside was another minute the fleet had to hold against overwhelming odds. Finally, they reached the core chamber. It was enormous, the size of a small city. A massive reactor dominated the center, drawing power directly from the dead star outside. Around it, manufacturing bays produced new Voidborn units every few seconds. Minji scanned the reactor, her face growing pale. "Captain," she said quietly, "the reactor is too stable. We cannot destroy it from outside. Someone needs to overload it from the control center. The radiation levels there are lethal. It will take at least 10 minutes to complete the sequence." Everyone understood what that meant. Whoever stayed behind would not survive. Counselor Terran stepped forward before anyone else could speak. "I will do it," he said simply. "Counselor, you do not have to," Daeho began. "Yes, I do," Terran interrupted. "My dismissiveness helped cause this catastrophe. 800 million of my own people died because I would not listen to your warnings. Billions more across the galaxy suffered because of Council arrogance. I cannot bring them back, but I can ensure their deaths meant something." Daeho wanted to argue, to find another way. But Minji showed him the calculations. There was no other way. The reactor had to be overloaded manually, and the radiation would kill anyone who tried within minutes of exposure. "Dr. Park will show me what to do," Terran said. "The rest of you must leave. When this reactor goes, the entire structure will be destroyed. Everything connected to it across the quantum network will fail. Every Voidborn unit will stop functioning. But you need to be far away when it happens." Minji quickly explained the overload sequence to Terran. The counselor listened carefully, asking questions to make sure he understood. When she finished, he turned to Daeho. "Captain Kim, I have one request. Tell the galaxy what happened here. Tell them about the price of dismissiveness. Tell them about the people who died because the powerful would not listen to warnings from those they considered beneath them. Make sure this lesson is remembered. I promise," Daeho said, his voice thick with emotion. Terran body language shifted, and what Daeho had learned was the Valtorian equivalent of a smile. "It was an honor to serve with you, Captain. With all of humanity, you were right about everything. I hope the galaxy will finally learn to listen." The strike team evacuated. Daeho was the last to leave, watching Terran move toward the control center. The old counselor did not look back. They raced back through the corridors. Behind them, alarms began to sound throughout the structure. Terran had started the overload sequence. Outside, the battle was reaching its peak. The fleet had lost over half its ships. Hyun's own vessel was heavily damaged, But they were still fighting, still holding the line. "All ships, this is Captain Kim," Daeho broadcast as his shuttle cleared the structure. "The overload is in progress. Full retreat. Get as far away as possible. We have 3 minutes." The fleet began withdrawing, still fighting as they pulled back. The Voidborn pursued, sensing something was wrong but unable to understand what. Then the structure exploded. The detonation was massive, consuming the ancient megastructure in a ball of energy that rivaled a star-going supernova. The explosion, propagated through quantum connections that linked every Voidborn unit across dozens of star systems. Throughout the galaxy, Voidborn units simply stopped. They froze in place, then began breaking apart as the network that sustained them collapsed. The threat that had killed billions and consumed entire worlds died in an instant. On the bridge of his damaged ship, Hyun watched the Voidborn units around them go dark. The battle was over. They had won. But the price had been terrible. The fleet gathered to count their losses. Over half the ships were destroyed. Tens of thousands of people from dozens of species had died, but the galaxy was saved. 3 months later, a memorial was unveiled on Unity Prime. It was a massive structure of black stone, engraved with the names of every person who died fighting the Voidborn. At the very top, in the place of highest honor, 2 names were carved larger than the others: Lieutenant Sunwoo Lee of Earth and Counselor Terran of Valtoria. The dedication ceremony was attended by representatives from every council species. The chamber was silent as the memorial was revealed. No speeches had been planned. The names spoke for themselves. Afterward, the council held a formal session. They offered humanity a permanent seat among the senior members, with full voting rights and equal standing. They also issued an official apology for dismissing Earth warnings and promised reforms to ensure such mistakes never happened again. Captain Daeho Kim, now promoted to Admiral, accepted the council seat on behalf of Earth. But his speech was not triumphant. "We did not seek this recognition," Daeho said to the assembled council. "We did what needed to be done because it was right, not because we wanted validation. Billions died before the galaxy learned to listen to warnings regardless of who issued them. That price was too high. The real question is whether the lesson will be remembered, or if we will repeat these mistakes in the future." The council chamber remained silent. They knew he was right. Months passed. The galaxy slowly rebuilt. The human fleet returned to Earth, where they were greeted as heroes. Dr. Minji Park received every scientific honor the council could bestow. Commander Hyun Choi retired from active service but continued training the next generation of officers. Ambassador Jiwon Han returned to Unity Prime, this time with the respect her decades of service had always deserved. 1 year after the battle, Daeho stood at the memorial again. It was early morning station time, and he was alone. He looked at the names carved in stone, thinking about the people behind them: Sunwoo, who had been so young and optimistic; Terran, who had learned humility too late but had found redemption in sacrifice. Jiwon found him there. She stood beside him in comfortable silence for a while before speaking. "Do you think they learned?" she asked quietly. "Do you think they will really listen now?" Daeho considered the question. The council had reformed many of its procedures. Junior species now had more voice in decision-making. Warning systems had been established to ensure information was not dismissed based on its source. Changes had been made. "Some learned," he said finally. "Others will need more reminders. Institutional arrogance dies slowly. But yes, I think we made a difference. The next time humanity or any younger species raises a warning, it will be taken seriously, at least for a few generations until the memory fades. Is that enough? It has to be. We cannot control what happens 1,000 years from now. We can only do our best today and hope the lessons survive." A young Valtorian approached them, moving hesitantly. Daeho recognized her from the council junior staff. She stopped a respectful distance away. "Admiral Kim," she said softly, "I wanted to thank you.